Chapter 1: The Hook. The chapter opens in the biting cold of a snow-covered landscape just before dawn, where a brutal battle has been raging for 3 days. The narrative follows Lan Mandragoran, a lord and commander, as he inspects the sentries of his fireless camp. He is a man accustomed to harsh conditions, though even he feels the chill through his steel breastplate. His character is immediately established through his connection to his sword, an ancient and unbreakable blade forged with the One Power during the legendary War of the Shadow. This weapon is not merely a tool, but a legacy, the former sword of the kings of Malkia, Lan's lost homeland, symbolizing his noble and tragic past. His own helmet, in the Malkiri style with a steel crescent moon, further marks his heritage. Lan's leadership style is revealed through his quiet and firm interactions with his exhausted men. He discovers a sentry named Basram dozing against a tree and wakes him not with anger, but with a calm warning about the fatal consequences of such a lapse against the formidable Aiel. He thoughtfully refrains from lecturing the man on frostbite, recognizing that the experienced Damani soldier already knows the risks. This moment also introduces a piece of world building, the rumor of Aes Sedai providing miraculous healing, and the general caution among soldiers about becoming entangled in the schemes of these powerful women. Lan continues his rounds, waking other weary soldiers, including an old soldier named Jaim, whom he disciplines with a clever threat of social humiliation among his peers, rather than a direct punishment, a tactic that proves highly effective. These interactions paint a portrait of a commander who understands his men's exhaustion, but demands vigilance for their collective survival. The narrative deepens with the introduction of Bukama, a broad and grizzled warrior who has been shadowing Lan on his rounds. Bukama is more than a subordinate. He was one of Lan's teachers, and is the last survivor of the 20 men tasked with carrying the infant Lan to safety after the fall of Malkia. Their bond is that of a student and master, ward and guardian, and deep friendship. Bukama's gruff concern for Lan's safety, coupled with his adherence to tradition, such as wearing the braided leather Hadori cord in his hair, reinforces their shared cultural roots. Their conversation reveals a key tension in the war, the widespread belief that the Aiel are dark friends, puppets of the Dark One in a prophesied 1,000-year cycle of destruction. Bukama staunchly holds this view, while Lan confesses he no longer believes it, but continues to fight out of a solemn commitment to a word he has given, highlighting his unwavering sense of honor. The plot is set in motion by the arrival of a messenger, a tyrant officer whose arrogance is immediately apparent. The man remains mounted, wears rose-scented oils on his beard which could betray their position, and speaks with a tone of command, all of which are breaches of etiquette that Lan notes with internal disapproval. To control his rising anger, Lan employs a mental discipline called Kodi, or the Oneness, a state of perfect calm, where he detaches from his emotions to achieve clarity. The message is a classic military maneuver. A Lord Emaris is pursuing roughly 600 Aiel and requires Lan's force of over 300 men to act as an anvil on a nearby ridge called the Hook, allowing Emaris's force to be the hammer that crushes the Aiel from behind. Lan accepts the mission, and his men mobilize with swift, silent efficiency born of long experience. They ride hard through the fading night, conserving their horses' strength with a disciplined rhythm of cantering, trotting, and walking. They arrive at the Hook, a low, treeless ridge, as the sky begins to lighten, affording them a view of the distant White Tower in Tar Valon and the colossal, smoke-plumed peak of Dragon Mount. His men, a mix of hardened Borderlanders and Damani, take their positions and prepare their bows, the preferred weapon against the swift and deadly Aiel. The plan is simple: to hold the Aiel in place with a barrage of arrows until Emares strikes their rear. The climax of the chapter arrives with a stunning subversion of expectations. The Aiel emerge from a distant copse of trees, but their numbers are vastly greater than reported, not 600, but closer to 2,000. This transforms the planned engagement from a tactical advantage to a near-certain slaughter. Despite the overwhelming odds, Lan remains calm, his resolve unshaken. He will not abandon his post because he gave his word, but he formulates a desperate contingency to wheel his men away if the Aiel close to within 200 paces before Imaris arrives. As strange trumpet calls echo from afar, the Aiel do something completely baffling. They halt well out of bow range, and every warrior raises a spear high. In perfect unison, they shout a single phrase in the old tongue that booms across the snow. An Alain. Lan recognizes the words, translating them as one man alone, but is mystified by their meaning. Then, in a final act of inexplicable behavior, the entire Aiel column turns and marches away, ignoring Lan's force on the ridge completely. The chapter ends not with a battle, but with profound confusion. Lan decides to find Imaris, not to fight, but to understand what has just transpired, sensing that this strange day has more oddities yet to reveal. In the Amerlin seat's sitting room, an intense and penetrating cold permeated the air, making Moiraine shiver despite the fire blazing in a distant hearth. The chill seeped in from poorly fitted windows that overlooked the Amerlin's garden and rose from the marble floor, making the great serpent ring on her finger feel like a band of ice. She stood where she had been told, alongside her closest friend, Siouan Sanche, both serving as attendants through the night. Moraine's discomfort was compounded by the acrid smell of smoke from villages burned by the Isle, a constant reminder of the massive battle raging just outside Tar Valon's walls. This war, started by her own uncle, was a source of deep anxiety, yet as an accepted, she was confined to the tower and given no information, an exclusion that she found immensely frustrating. The two women they attended, Tamra Ospenia, the Amerlin seat, and her keeper of the chronicles, Gitara Moroso, seemed entirely unaffected by the cold or the smoke. Moiraine observed their composed, ageless Aes Sedai faces, noting that they were masters of controlling their emotions. Tamra, the revered and just ruler of the White Tower, appeared to be studying a folder of papers, though she never turned a page. Gitara, a flamboyant woman known for her rare and powerful talent of foretelling, was pretending to write a letter, yet her pen remained poised over the paper for hours, the ink drying repeatedly. This subtle tension revealed that both women were deeply worried, which in turn heightened Moraine's own fears. She speculated internally about the cause of their concern, wondering if the Aiel were about to breach the city's legendary defences, or if some other disaster was unfolding. Siouan, ever perceptive, offered Moiraine a quiet, reassuring smile, a reminder of their deep friendship. The two were vastly different in background, Moiraine, a Kaihayanin noblewoman, and Siouan, the daughter of a Tyren fisherman, but they were equals in the tower, both prodigies who had completed their novice training in a record 3 years. Their bond was a source of strength for Moiraine, and Siouan's silent encouragement helped her endure the tense vigil. The prolonged silence was shattered by the distant, urgent sound of hundreds of trumpets from the battlefield. Alarmed, the Amerlin ordered Moiraine to see if there was any news and instructed Siouan to quickly prepare tea. As Moiraine entered the antechamber, she found the novice on duty, Elin, engrossed in a romance novel, completely oblivious to her surroundings. Moiraine gently chided her, adopting the authoritative tone of a full sister, before asking about messages from the battle, a question she already knew was futile. Returning to the sitting room, she found Siouan using the one power to boil the water, a sign of the Amerlin's urgency. As Moiraine carried a cup of sweetened tea to Gitara, and while Tamra stood anxiously at the window, the keeper of the chronicles suddenly lurched to her feet, her face a mask of pure terror. In a powerful, resonant voice that filled the room, Gitara delivered a foretelling. She cried out that the dragon was born again, that he was taking his first breath on the slopes of Dragonmount, burning like the sun and crying like thunder. With her final word, Gitara gasped and collapsed, falling dead into Moraine's arms. In the shocking aftermath, as Tamra knelt beside the body of her friend and advisor, her initial grief quickly hardened into grim resolve. The Emirlin looked at Moiraine and Siwan, the two young women who were now party to the most dangerous secret in the world. She gave them a stark and unprecedented command. They were to tell no one what they had heard. They were to forget the foretelling, and if ever questioned, they were to lie, even to other Aes Sedai. The weight of this secret and this command settled heavily upon Moiraine, who reflected with bitter irony that she had always wished to witness a foretelling, never imagining that the one she heard would be a prophecy of such world-shattering doom. Chapter 2. A Wish Fulfilled. The narrative opens within the Amelin Seat's sitting room, a space rendered deeply uncomfortable by a pervasive chill that defies the large fire burning on the hearth. Moiraine, an accepted of the White Tower, stands in attendance, struggling against the cold that seeps from the drafty windows and marble floor, a cold so intense it makes her feel as if the golden great serpent ring on her finger is a band of ice. Her discomfort is compounded by fatigue from a lack of sleep and the acrid smell of smoke from villages burning outside Tar Valon, a constant reminder of the massive battle raging against the Aiel. Despite her uncle having instigated the war, Moiraine feels a powerful, illogical urge to know the details of the fighting. But all accepted have been confined to the tower, shielded from any direct information. Her attention is fixed on the two Aes Sedai in the room, Tamra Ospenya, the Emirlin Seat, and Gitara Moroso, her keeper of the chronicles. Moiraine observes them with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. Tamra is portrayed as a just, fair, and immensely powerful ruler whom Moiraine respects greatly. Gitara, in contrast, is a more flamboyant and enigmatic figure, rumoured to be incredibly old, and more importantly, to possess the rare talent of the foretelling. Moiraine notes with suspicion that both women, despite their composed, ageless facades, appear deeply worried. For hours, Tamra has stared at a folder of papers without turning a page, while Gitara has sat poised over a letter, her ink repeatedly drying on the nib of her pen. Moiraine speculates that their anxiety must be tied to the battle, perhaps stemming from one of Gitara's unrevealed prophecies. A brief, quiet interaction with her closest friend, Siwan Sanche, who is also in attendance, provides a moment of warmth. A whispered word and a shared smile break the tension, and the narrative delves into the nature of their friendship, highlighting their contrasting backgrounds, Moiraine from Cairhienin nobility, and Siwan the daughter of a Tyran fisherman, yet their profound similarities in strength and ambition within the tower. Suddenly, the faint but urgent sound of hundreds of trumpets from the battlefield pierces the quiet of the room. Startled, the Emirlin sends Moiraine to seek news and tasks Siwan with preparing tea with uncharacteristic haste. After a brief and slightly awkward encounter in the anteroom with a novice named Elin, Moiraine returns to the sitting room to find the situation has escalated dramatically. As Moiraine approaches with a cup of sweetened tea, Gitara Moroso lurches to her feet, her eyes wide with terror, and unleashes a powerful and horrifying foretelling. She cries out that the dragon has been born again, that he takes his first breath on the slopes of Dragonmount, describing him crying like thunder and burning like the sun. With her final word, Gitara collapses, falling into Moiraine's arms. Tamra rushes to her side, but her use of the one power to delve for life reveals it is too late. Gitara is dead. In the shocking aftermath, surrounded by the spilled ink and shattered composure, the Amerlin issues a command of unprecedented gravity. She orders Moiraine and Siwan to reveal nothing of what they have witnessed, insisting they must lie if necessary, even to other Aes Sedai, and claim Gitara died without speaking. The chapter concludes with Moiraine's chilling realization that her wish to witness a foretelling has been granted in the most terrible way imaginable, foretelling not victory, but a world-altering doom. Chapter 3. Practice. Following their meeting with the Emirlin, Moiraine and Siwan walked through a wide, cold corridor, the drafts making the flames of the stand lamps flicker. Moiraine was too stunned by Gitara's foretelling to speak, her mind drifting to irrelevant details about the tower's architecture, such as the equal use of the 7 Aja colors in the floor tiles, despite the varying sizes of the Ajas. Siwan, ever practical, broke the silence by offering to get breakfast. But Moiraine had no appetite. She suggested returning to her room to sleep before a novice class, but Siwan insisted they use the time to practice for the test to earn the Aes Sedai shawl, arguing that the mistress of novices, Marian, was known to test candidates soon after declaring them ready. Moiraine reluctantly agreed, acknowledging the established dynamic of their friendship, where the fisherman's daughter naturally led and the noblewoman followed. Moiraine predicted Siwan would one day become the Amirlin's seat, a notion Siwan vehemently rejected, proclaiming her desire to travel the world and see wonders beyond the known maps once she earned the shawl. As they moved into a plainer section of the tower, Siwan directly addressed the subject Moiraine was avoiding, the rebirth of the dragon. Moiraine was filled with a chilling dread, contemplating the prophecies that foretold both the world's salvation and its potential destruction at the hands of this child. The child would channel Saidin, the male half of the One Power, which was tainted by the Dark One. She shuddered at the thought of the inevitable madness that befell all male channelers and the new breaking of the world the prophecies promised. Despite this, she knew his victory was preferable to one by the Dark One. When Siwan pressed for her thoughts, Moiraine cautiously reminded her of the Amirlin's order not to speak of it. But Siwan interpreted this as a command not to tell others, permitting them to discuss it privately. They arrived at the Accepted's quarters, a hollow well of rooms surrounding a snow-covered garden. Moiraine reflected on the tower's decline, noting the vast number of empty rooms for both Accepted and novices, a somber reality in the face of the approaching last battle. Inside Siwan's Spartan room, Siwan used the One Power to light a fire, justifying the breach of rules with a quote from a recent lecture about knowing when rules could be broken. This reminded Moiraine of their shared history of pranks, a necessary relief from the strain of their studies. Moiraine then prepared to practice the 100 specific weaves required for the test, a trial of skill and composure under extreme stress. Siwan wove a ward against eavesdropping, making Moiraine wonder if it was part of the distraction or a genuine precaution for their forbidden conversation. As Moiraine began the first, simple weave, Siwan immediately tried to unsettle her by asking if the Red Aja would be able to leave the Dragon Reborn alone, causing Moiraine to fumble. Regaining her composure, she continued weaving while they discussed the grim fate prophesied for the dragon, who would likely be gentled after facing the Dark One. Their practice was interrupted by another Accepted, Myrelle Berengari, who burst in without knocking. Seeing them practicing, she offered to help with distractions. She mistakenly concluded their secret conversation was about the Isle War, a misunderstanding Siwan cleverly encouraged through an evasive Aes Sedai-like answer. Myrelle joined the practice, proving to be a far more severe source of distraction than Siwan. She used flows of the power to create ice inside Moiraine's dress, deliver sharp pinches, and even levitate her upside down, forcing Moiraine to restart the sequence of weaves multiple times. Frustrated with her own failures but determined, Moiraine persisted, knowing the actual test would be even worse. Their session was interrupted again by Tana Fair, a cool and aloof Accepted, who announced that novice classes were cancelled because the Amirlin was to address all the Accepted in the Oval Lecture Hall. She also formally announced the death of Gitara Moroso, which caused Myrelle to flare up in anger, believing this was the secret Moiraine and Siwan had been keeping from her. The group ran to the lecture hall, an unusually undignified act for Accepted, arriving just before the Amirlin. The hall was barely a quarter full, another stark reminder of the tower's dwindling numbers. Tamra Ospenya appeared, looking weary, and announced an unprecedented bounty of 100 gold crowns for every woman in Tar Valon, and the surrounding army camps who had recently given birth. To administer this, she was sending all the Accepted, escorted by tower guards, out into the camps to collect names. This was an unheard of mission, as accepted, were almost never allowed outside the tower without a sister. The Emerlin issued stern warnings about the dangers, from ruffians to the children of the light who might target them. As a final, seemingly incidental instruction, she told them to record the infant's name, sex, and the exact time and place of birth for the tower's records. Moiraine and Siwan exchanged an excited glance, instantly understanding the true purpose of their task. They were being sent to find the dragon reborn. Moiraine's quarters were nearly identical to Siwan's, furnished with the same Spartan simplicity. With no time to spare for comfort, she ignored the unlit fireplace and prepared for the journey ahead. She donned a pair of ugly but practical, thick leather shoes and an extra pair of woolen stockings, deciding against a second shift due to the pressing need for haste. Into a leather scrip, she packed a variety of items she deemed potentially useful, including her comb and hairbrush, good riding gloves, a sewing kit, twine, and a small folding knife, believing it unwise to depend completely on what the Emerlin might have provided. She also fastened a slim dagger to her belt, a weapon she had not worn in the tower, but which would serve as a permissible form of defense. Upon meeting Seowan in the gallery, she found her friend brimming with excitement amidst a cacophony of other accepted, rushing to borrow or return items before their own departures. They proceeded to the west stable, where a crowd of grooms and helmeted tower guards filled the yard. Moiraine located her personal mare, Arrow, a horse she had purchased for its impressive endurance, an act of ostentation that had nearly earned her a reprimand. Checking her saddlebags, she discovered that provisions, including bread, cheese, and dried fruit, had already been packed, along with a lap desk complete with paper and pens. This forethought from the tower amused a nearby groom, who watched her meticulously check the ink jar. Moiraine mounted with practiced skill, though she felt a moment of embarrassment as her skirts rode up, exposing her stockinged legs to the gaze of several guardsmen. Siwan, by contrast, scrambled clumsily onto her own mount, a stout gelding, her inexperience with riding on full display. A grizzled, scowling bannerman named Stella was appointed to lead their 8-man escort. As they rode out, Siwan immediately attempted to direct Stella toward their intended destination on the west bank, but the bannerman gruffly dismissed her, insisting they remain inside the protective ring of his soldiers. Thwarted, Siwan fell back beside Moiraine, who chose to enjoy the rare opportunity to see the city. They rode through the bustling streets of Tar Valon, a vibrant tapestry of people from every nation, from veiled Tarrabonas to stoic Cheyenne-Arans. The city's marvels unfolded around them, its unique ogier-built structures suggesting fantastical shapes like soaring birds and sleeping cats. Moiraine even spotted a towering ogier stonemason and exchanged a formal bow, feeling a slight blush when his ears twitched in what she took for amusement. After nearly an hour, they reached the Alindea Gate and crossed one of the magnificent bridges constructed with the power. The feeling of being outside the city walls filled Moiraine with a thrilling sense of freedom. But it was short-lived. Stela halted their party upon spotting a group of white cloaks at the far end of the bridge. As they waited, Moiraine grew impatient and briefly considered using a flow of air to compel the bannerman forward, only to be stopped by a sharp, cautionary whisper from Siwan. Once the white cloaks moved on, Siwan tried a more cunning tactic, attempting to persuade Stela to visit the more distant camps first by invoking the Emerlin seat's name and supposed strategy. Stela, however, remained resolute, flatly stating his orders were to visit the camps closest to the river and threatening to escort them back to the tower if they caused any trouble. Defeated, they rode south, away from Dragonmount, passing through the desolate and silent village of Alindea. Siwan's frustration was palpable as she frequently glanced back toward the mountain peak. They soon passed the first refugee camp, but did not stop, as another accepted, the tactless Serene, was already at work there. They continued to a second, larger, and more chaotic camp populated by prickly Mirandians. Stela announced their purpose in a booming voice, and the intimidated refugees quickly provided them with a table, stools, and 2 braziers, allowing Moiraine and Siuan to finally begin their task of recording names. Chapter 4. Leaving the Tower. Moiraine's preparations to depart the White Tower begin in her modest room, a space nearly identical in its Spartan furnishings to Siuan's. She opts for practicality over comfort, forgoing a fire in the chilly air in favor of speed. She exchanges her thin slippers for a pair of stout, ugly leather shoes, and adds woolen stockings over her existing ones, recognizing the need for protection against the snow. Although she considers adding another layer of clothing for warmth, the pressing lack of time and the discomfort of changing in the cold dissuade her. She reassures herself that their task of recording names will surely take place in a sheltered location with a heat source. Her thoughts then turn to a narrow leather belt holding a silver-mounted dagger, a weapon she has not worn since becoming an accepted. This act represents a shift in her mindset. While forbidden from using the One Power as a weapon, she acknowledges the potential need for physical self-defense. Her forethought continues as she packs a leather scrip with practical items, anticipating needs beyond what the Amerlin seat might have provided. She includes her comb and hairbrush, a sewing kit, twine, spare stockings, and a small folding knife, demonstrating a belief that maintaining the disciplined appearance of an accepted will be expected, regardless of their mission's urgency. Her packing complete, she emerges to find the accepted's quarters in a state of chaotic excitement, a stark contrast to her own focused preparation. Other women are rushing about, calling for borrowed items, creating a cacophony that would earn them severe punishment were a sister present. Siuan awaits her impatiently, her own script packed and her eyes bright with the thrill of their clandestine purpose. They hurry towards the west stable, passing through a wide path cleared in the snow, not for their convenience, but for the Aes Sedai, who keep their horses there. The stable yard is a flurry of activity, filled with grooms, saddled horses, and helmeted tower guards. Moiraine feels a flicker of irritation, seeing that several other accepted have already departed, but reminds herself that she and Siuan are the only ones who know the true objective of this widespread effort. She locates her bay mare, Arrow, a horse chosen for its endurance and agility rather than its size. She recalls with some chagrin how learning of the mare's jumping ability had earned her a reprimand from the mistress of novices. The groom holding her horse is openly disdainful, but Moiraine ignores the woman's mockery as she checks her saddlebags. Inside, she finds that provisions have already been packed for her, including bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a complete lap desk with paper, pens, and ink. The discovery both confirms the Amerlin's support and renders some of her own careful packing redundant. Moiraine mounts with the practiced ease of a lifelong rider, though the design of her dress, not meant for riding, causes a moment of awkwardness and exposes her legs, much to her annoyance and the open interest of several guardsmen. Siuan, in contrast, struggles clumsily onto her gelding, her inexperience with horses painfully obvious. Their escort is formed by 8 soldiers under the command of a grizzled, scowling bannerman named Steela. Siuan immediately attempts to assert her authority, trying to direct the guards toward the west bank as instructed. But Steela curtly dismisses her, making it clear that their safety and itinerary are his responsibility, and any fuss will result in their immediate return to the tower. Defeated, Siuan falls back beside Moiraine, and they whisper about their slim but real chance of being the ones to find the newborn dragon. Siuan's frustration with Steela is palpable, and she vows that her own warder will be more obedient, prompting a brief moment of shared humour between the friends. Their journey takes them through the vast and vibrant city of Tar Valon. Moiraine, so rarely allowed outside the tower grounds, savours the experience. The streets are a tapestry of life, crowded with people from every nation, from veiled Taraboners to stoic bordermen. The air is filled with the sounds of commerce and daily life, a scene of determined normality that seems to ignore the recent battle fought just outside the city walls. The city itself is a marvel of Ogier-built architecture, with fantastical towers and buildings shaped like animals, and natural forms rising around them, all under the singular gaze of the White Tower itself. During the ride, Moiraine spots an Ogier stonemason and offers him a respectful bow, a gesture he returns with what seems to be a knowing grin. Siwan, however, is so intensely focused on studying Bannerman Staler, trying to solve the puzzle of how to influence him, that she fails to notice the rare sight, her concentration making her ride with uncharacteristic stability. Upon reaching the Elindea Gate and crossing one of the magnificent power-wrought bridges that span the river, Moiraine feels a profound sense of freedom. Their progress is halted, however, by the sight of a group of Children of the Light at the far end of the bridge. The tension is immediate, and Moiraine instinctively considers using the power before Siwan's low, sharp whisper brings her back to her senses, reminding her of the rules that bind them. After the White Cloaks depart, Steela leads them cautiously into the nearly deserted village of Elindea. Here, Siwan makes a second, more cunning attempt to direct their course toward Dragonmount. Adopting a tone of command, she argues that the Amirlin seat would wish for them to visit the most distant camps first, to ensure no potential mothers slip away. It is a masterful performance, yet Steela remains unmoved, stating simply that his orders are to check the camps closest to the river, and he will follow them. Frustrated but unable to sway him, they ride south, away from their target. They pass a large refugee camp already being serviced by another accepted, Sarene, whom they briefly observe using the power to enhance their sight. They continue to a second, even larger camp, where their arrival and Steela's bellowed announcement of their purpose, to distribute the Amelin's bounty, are met not with hostility, but with cooperation. The Mirandian refugees quickly provide them with a table, stools, and braziers for warmth, setting the stage for them to finally begin their vital work. Chapter 5. The Human Heart. The chapter commences with Moiraine seated at a table in a bustling military camp, finding the conditions far more disagreeable than she had anticipated. Despite the warmth from nearby braziers, the chill of the open air is pervasive, and the thin grey smoke stings her eyes. Her feet, already cold from the ride, become frigid on the trampled snow. A chaotic crowd of nearly 100 women, many holding infants, surrounds the table, all clamouring to have their names recorded first for the White Tower's bounty. Moiraine observes the unusual mix of commoners and nobility, noting with some disdain that the finely dressed noblewomen are shouting just as loudly as the rest, a display she considers a hallmark of Mirandian lack of decorum. When a tower guardsman named Steela attempts to impose order by shouting, he is completely ignored. As two other guardsmen move to physically push the women back, their bannerman halts them, wisely averting a potential riot. Moiraine stands, unsure how to handle the situation, but Siwan acts first. Climbing atop her stool, Siwan envelops herself in the glow of Saidar and, weaving air and fire, projects her voice with the force of thunder, commanding quiet. The simple but powerful command instantly silences the entire camp, even the blacksmiths. After this display, Siwan addresses the women without the power, her firm voice carrying as she instructs them to form orderly lines or risk forfeiting the bounty, admonishing them to behave like adults rather than unruly children. The women quickly comply, forming two lines, with the wealthier women naturally positioning themselves at the front. As Moiraine begins the tedious task of recording names, she feels the initial thrill of being outside the city walls quickly fade into boring drudgery. Her first subject is the Lady Mary do Alanaconlin, a plump and proud woman who boasts of her direct descent from the first Queen of Mirandi. Lady Mary intends to have the bounty coins framed for her newborn son, Cedrin, as a testament to the honour bestowed by the White Tower. Moiraine, inexperienced with babies, can only hope the woman is telling the truth about the child's age. Her attention is drawn to a woman named Karaim Mowley, who is pointedly avoiding the line. When questioned, Lady Mary dismisses the woman with aristocratic contempt, but her serving woman explains that Karaim is heartbroken after her intended lover ran off to become a warder and wants nothing to do with the White Tower. Moiraine, adhering strictly to the Emirlin's command to get every name, insists on recording Karem and her daughter, Elia, an act which seems to earn her a measure of wary respect from Lady Mary. Meanwhile, Siwan handles her line with an unshakable authority that Moiraine envies, extracting information without allowing for argument or complaint. The repetitive work is miserable, punctuated only by brief moments of warming her aching fingers over a brazier. She observes the many pregnant women in the camp, pondering that one of them might be carrying the dragon reborn, and feels a sense of unfairness that some other accepted will be the one to find the child, while she, who knows the truth, will not. A pivotal moment occurs when a gaunt woman named Susa Wynn presents a child, Cyril, who is obviously several months old, far too old for the bounty. As Moiraine prepares to turn her away, a subtle touch from Siwan makes her reconsider. Observing Susa's desperate poverty, her sunken eyes, and her worn, heavily darned clothing, Moiraine learns that the woman's husband, Jack, died in a mundane accident before the fighting even began. Moved by the woman's tragic story and the baby's chesty cough, Moiraine makes a compassionate exception. She records their names, reflecting that the tower can afford the gold for a woman and child who might otherwise perish, and internally seethes at the failure of noble responsibility that allowed Susa to fall into such a state. She then gives the woman a silver penny from her own purse for a healer, or wisdom, as they are known in Mirandi. This act of kindness has unintended consequences. Word spreads that the Aes Sedai are being lenient, and soon other women with older children attempt to take advantage. When a well-fed woman with an avaricious gleam in her eye tries her luck, Moiraine's temper flares. She coolly offers to heal the woman's infant, knowing the process is dangerous for one so young, and that the mother would be terrified. The bluff works perfectly. The woman recoils in fear and withdraws her attempt to cheat the tower. This shrewd maneuver earns a quiet murmur of approval from Siwan. During their midday meal, a leathery-faced woman brings them spiced wine and commends Moiraine for her kindness to Susa Wynn. Moiraine and Siwan realize this woman knows they are merely accepted, not full Aes Sedai, likely having been to the tower in her youth. Their quiet lunch is interrupted by the arrival of two Aes Sedai, Maelin Arganya of the White Aja and, to Moiraine's dismay, Elida Aroyhan of the Red. Elida has been a harsh and demanding presence in their lives, and her appearance fills Moiraine with dread. Elida is severe but surprisingly subdued, deferring to the serene and respected Maelin. Maelin explains the proliferation of war babies, offering a philosophical insight that gives the chapter its name. When faced with death, men and women seek to leave a legacy, an illogical but powerful impulse of the human heart. Moiraine is then captivated by the silent communication between Maelin and her warder, Andro. Maelin seems to read Moiraine's mind, explaining that it is not telepathy, but a deep, interpretive understanding born of a long-standing bond. After a pointed comment from Maelin about the Red Aja's logical need for warders, a comment Elida surprisingly lets pass, the two sisters depart, reminding them to return before dark. With the authority of the full Aes Sedai gone, the remaining women in line become argumentative again. As sunset approaches, Stella and his guardsmen return to escort them back, but the last dozen women protest. The same leathery-faced woman who brought them wine leads a crowd of other women to surround and block the guards, buying Moiraine and Siwan just enough time to finish recording the last names in a flurry of activity. The ride back to Tar Valon is a grueling race against the setting sun, with Siwan, a poor rider, suffering greatly in the saddle. They arrive back at the tower just as the sun disappears, and Stela covers for their lateness. Exhausted and sore, Siwan heads for her room, while Moiraine is met by another accepted, Katarine, with a summons to the study of Merian, the mistress of novices. Fearing she is in trouble, Moiraine goes alone. In her plain, intimidating study, Merian gravely informs Moiraine that her uncles, King Laman Damodred and his two brothers, were killed in battle the previous day. Moiraine, however, feels no grief, only a solemn sense of duty. She reflects on their cruelty and ambition, feeling more sadness for the dead soldier Jack Wynne than for her own kin. Marian misinterprets her composure as shock and offers her leave from her duties, but Moiraine politely refuses, stating that work and friends will be a better comfort. Later that night, after a penance of prayer for her uncle's souls, Moiraine is assailed by terrible nightmares. She dreams of an infant wailing like thunder on Dragonmount, and of a faceless young man calling down lightning that incinerates cities. Waking in tears, she seeks refuge in Siouan's room, only to find her friend also awake and plagued by similar visions. They lie awake together for the remainder of the night, sharing their profound fear and uncertainty about the dragon reborn. They question what can possibly be done for him, knowing he must be guided and protected, but also aware that the tower cannot teach him to channel. The chapter closes with the two young women unable to sleep, haunted by the immense and terrifying weight of their shared secret. Chapter 6. Surprises. The day begins before dawn, with a timid novice named Setsuko summoning all accepted to the West Stable, an order from the Amirlin to continue their work of recording names from the army camps. Moiraine observes the envy in the novice's eyes, a sad recognition that Setsuko will never achieve the shawl, and is only kept at the tower until she can safely channel, a common fate for those with insufficient strength. After a brief embrace with Siouan, Moiraine rushes to prepare, finding her own door attended by a sulky novice named Lysandre, whose attitude will need correcting if she hopes to advance. Meeting Siouan and a chafing Sheriam on the gallery, Moiraine learns that the Aiel are reportedly retreating far east of the river. Sheriam confirms this news, having heard it from multiple sisters, which she considers a reliable indicator of its truth. Moiraine and Siouan share a private, joyful grin at the news, not because their journey will be easier, but because a retreat might allow them to convince their escorts to take them closer to Dragonmount, advancing their secret mission to find the prophesied child. Their plans are abruptly halted by the arrival of Marian, the mistress of novices, who appears on the gallery wearing her formal blue-fringed shawl, an unusual and ominous sight inside the tower that signifies either a summoning for testing or serious trouble. While Siouan and Sheriam look on with hopeful anticipation, Moiraine's heart pounds with the fear that she is about to be tested before she feels prepared. The surprise, however, is of a different nature. Marian dismisses Sheriam and informs Moiraine that the Amerlin agrees she is in shock from her uncle's deaths and will be kept from the day's ride. Instead, she is assigned the task of copying the nearly illegible lists gathered by other accepted. When Siouan speaks up in agreement, noting Moiraine's lack of sleep, she inadvertently gets herself assigned to the same task. The two friends are led to a small windowless room near the Amerlin's apartments to begin their clerical work. Alone, Siouan explains her flawed logic. She believed this task would grant them access to more names, and that only Moiraine would be assigned to it. Moiraine then confides in Siouan about the true nature of her grief, and Siouan comforts her with a story of her own two disreputable uncles, street thugs for whom she will not grieve, reminding Moiraine that not all family members are worth the pain. Their bond is reaffirmed, and they proceed to the dining hall before starting the monotonous work. They discover the task is even more daunting than they imagined. Many entries are frustratingly vague, with locations described as merely in sight of Dragonmount or born within sight of Tarvalon's walls, phrases that cover a vast territory. Others are heartbreakingly incomplete, such as the entry for a woman named Celia Pumphrey, who, mad with grief over her husband's death, left for her unnamed village in Andor with her newborn son. This highlights the immense difficulty of finding one specific child among thousands with such poor records. The next day, they decide to continue their work without new orders. Their initiative is interrupted first by tower clerks who have been officially assigned the job, and then by the Amirlin seat herself, Tamra Ospenya. Tamra scrutinizes them, but after Moiraine gives a clever Aes Sedai answer regarding her continued need for distraction, allows them to continue. In a moment of subtle instruction, Tamra indirectly gives Moiraine permission to use the one power to remove an ink stain from her dress, a practice forbidden to accepted for mundane chores. Moiraine successfully weaves the power to remove the stain, a small act of defiance that Siuan notes wryly. Later, Moiraine finds the first promising entry, a boy named Billy Mandaya, born west of the river in sight of Dragonmount on the correct day. They begin secretly recording potential names in a small book. The day brings another, more unsettling series of surprises. Jana Malari, a sitter for the Grey Aja, pulls Moiraine aside to question her about the political succession in her native Caerhien, now that her uncles are dead. Moiraine is stunned to be asked for her opinion on such high-level politics. This proves to be only the beginning, as throughout the day, 6 other sitters, one from each of the remaining ages, approach her with similar inquiries. The questioning culminates in a direct and shocking suggestion from Tsutama Wrath, of the Red Aja, who casually asks if Moiraine has ever considered becoming Queen of Caerhien herself. This revelation transforms Moiraine's anxiety, creating a new nightmare of her sitting on the Sun Throne as an Aes Sedai while her city is destroyed. She realizes the Hall of the Tower may have political plans for her, and her desire to be tested for the shore becomes desperate, no longer a matter of readiness, but a means to gain the freedom to escape their machinations. Chapter 7, The Itch. The subsequent day's work yields an increasing number of names that fit the criteria for the newborn dragon reborn, though all references to his birthplace are deliberately vague, mentioning proximity to Dragonmount rather than the mountain itself. Moiraine analyzes this pattern, concluding that no mother would willingly admit to birthing a son destined to channel, let alone one who could be the dragon reborn, due to the fear and madness associated with such a fate. She understands that any investigation would require immense delicacy, a political dance akin to Dias Daemar, to extract the truth without alarming the mothers and causing them to flee. As she and Siuan work, the Amirlin's seat, Tamra, makes an unexpected visit. Moiraine hastily conceals her notebook of names, fearing discovery and the severe punishment of rustication, which would end their search permanently. Tamra, seemingly oblivious, gives Moiraine a sealed message to be delivered personally to Kareen Nagashi of the Green Aja. Moiraine's journey to the Green Aja quarters provides an opportunity for observation. She notes the intensely martial atmosphere, with sword motifs carved into the floors and doors, and tapestries depicting famous battles. The most notable difference from other Aja quarters is the significant presence of warders, men who move with a disciplined grace and possess an intense, self-aware gaze that Moiraine compares to a caped eagle's. Within Kareen's rooms, Moiraine observes a collection of mementos from a life spanning well over a century, items ranging from skulls and weapons to a simple, cracked bowl. These artifacts of a long and violent life stand in stark contrast to a small row of family miniatures, a poignant symbol of the personal losses an Aes Sedai endures. Upon reading Tamra's message, the serene Kareen shows no outward reaction, but her 2 warders, Kareel and Stepin, instantly transition from rest to a state of readiness, like leopards prepared to hunt, underscoring the message's urgency. On her way back, Moiraine encounters Siuan, who has delivered a similar urgent and secret message to a sister of the Grey Aja. Putting the pieces together, Moiraine has a crucial realization. She deduces that Tamra is not planning to bring the child to the tower, but is instead secretly recruiting a small, trustworthy cadre of experienced sisters from different Ajas to find him. She theorizes that these searchers, chosen for their strict adherence to law and their long years of service, will find the boy and arrange for his protection and education in secret, shielding him from the Red Aja and others within the tower who might wish him harm. This theory is reinforced when Tamra dispatches 3 more similar messages to sisters from the Brown and Yellow Ages. Their attempts to learn more by spying on the Amirlin's study are fruitless and end when the new keeper, Eldra Najaf, gently but firmly warns Moiraine away. The chapter concludes with Moiraine feeling an intense frustration. the torment of knowing the grand outline of Tamra's plan, but being denied the details, a sensation she identifies as an unbearable itch just beyond her reach. Chapter 8. Shreds of Serenity. The daily routine within the White Tower had become a grueling affair for Moiraine and Siouan, who found themselves exhausted by the long hours spent compiling their secret lists, leaving only their evenings for the mandatory lessons with Aes Sedai. The entire tower seemed to exist in a state of heightened tension, a feverish atmosphere that belied the winter chill. Many Aes Sedai were openly displeased with the disruption to their normal schedules, forced to teach novice-level classes that should have been handled by the Accepted. This resentment was often directed specifically at Moiraine and Siouan, who, unlike the other Accepted, could have theoretically managed their duties at more reasonable hours. Moiraine keenly felt the heated glares and the petty snubs from sisters who would claim to be busy when she or Siouan requested a lesson. She worried that these small irritations could curdle into permanent antagonisms. Her primary frustration, however, stemmed from the seeming lack of urgency among the very Aes Sedai who were aware of the dragon's rebirth. Sisters like Karine, Maylin, and Aisha would drill her on history, philosophy, and law, their faces masks of calm, while Moiraine burned with the need to begin the search. She concluded they must be waiting for the list to be complete, not yet comprehending the scale of the task ahead, and feeling no pressing need to act. Rumours swirled through the tower, speaking of the Isle War winding down and armies preparing to disperse, but the Aes Sedai dismissed such talk as irrational. Within the Accepted's quarters, Elad Aberraim shared a more significant piece of information, claiming to have overheard that Gitara Moroso had delivered another foretelling before her death, one predicting that Tarmangaidon would occur within the lifetime of currently living sisters. Moiraine seized upon this, theorizing to Siouan that this was the missing piece of the puzzle. An earlier foretelling must have alerted the Amirlin, Tamra, that the dragon's birth was imminent, explaining her certainty and swift action, following the prophecy they had overheard. This realization was interrupted by the resumption of their nightly practice for the test to earn the shawl, an exercise that was about to escalate dramatically. Elida, a stern sister of the Red Aja, discovered them practicing and, deeming their efforts pitiful, decided to demonstrate the proper method herself. What followed was a merciless ordeal. Elida subjected Moiraine to a continuous assault while she tried to weave, creating flashing lights, piercing sounds, and delivering a constant barrage of painful switch-like blows with the one power. Under this torment, Moiraine's concentration repeatedly shattered, and she ultimately collapsed to her knees, weeping from the overwhelming pain. Elida, unmoved, then inflicted the same brutal regimen on Siouan, who endured for longer, but also inevitably failed. A key difference in their characters was highlighted as Siouan stoically held back her tears until after the Red Sister had departed, her final words a cold critique that they lacked even a shred of serenity and must become faster. Horrified by their friend's condition, Myrelle, Sheriam, and Elid arrived each night to apply a soothing ointment to their welts and bruises. Moiraine, despite the agony, believed Elida was genuinely trying to help them pass, while Siouan was convinced the sister wanted them to fail. The nightly torture sessions continued for 2 more nights, leaving Moiraine terrified that she would soon break and beg for mercy. The ordeal was finally halted by Marian, the mistress of novices, who intervened and healed them. She revealed a startling truth. She had confronted Elida and threatened her with a severe penance, not for the brutal physical discipline, but for potentially helping them cheat on the test for the shawl. This implied that the brutal practice was a reflection of the actual test, a realization that filled Moiraine with a new and profound dread. The confrontation had a permanent consequence. When they next encountered Elida, her silent, burning gaze made it clear she believed they had reported her, cementing a deep-seated and lifelong animosity. A sudden and unseasonable thaw marked a turning point, melting the snow, and thereby establishing a 10-day window within which the child they sought must have been born. The flow of new names for their lists dwindled and then stopped. The search criteria were now fixed. 9 days after the thaw, as dawn was breaking, Marian approached Moiraine and Siouan on the gallery. Wearing her formal shawl, she addressed Moiraine directly, her voice official and solemn, summoning her to be tested for the shawl of an Aes Sedai. Chapter 9. It begins. The chapter opens with Moiraine in a state of profound anxiety, being led by Marian away from Siouan immediately after her summons. A growing sense of dread, described as a lump of ice in her core, accompanies her every step toward the location of her test, to be raised to Aes Sedai. Her mind is consumed by the belief that she is unprepared and destined for failure, having only managed to complete the 100 required weaves in their proper sequence twice during her practices. The thought of being sent away from the tower throbs in her mind like a drumbeat, signaling an execution. As she descends a spiral staircase deep into the bedrock beneath the tower, a series of new thoughts brings her an unexpected and strange sense of resolve. She reasons that even if she fails, she will not lose her ability to channel, and she would never give it up as other failed women were rumoured to do. Furthermore, she would still be Moiraine Damodred, with estates that could provide an income. The pivotal realization comes when she remembers the book of names in her belt pouch. If she fails the test, she will be free to begin the search for the prophesied boy on her own terms. Acknowledging the extreme danger of meddling in tower affairs as an outsider, she nonetheless accepts this potential path, murmuring, "The wheel weaves as the wheel wills." This thought process quiets her internal panic, though her desire to become Aes Sedai remains paramount. Moiraine leads her to a large, domed chamber on the lowest level, where a great, oval-shaped ter'angreal stands unsupported, its surface glittering and shifting through a kaleidoscope of colours. In the chamber are 7 Aes Sedai, one from each Aja, including Elida, whose presence makes Moiraine's heart flutter with unease. The formal ritual begins with a series of questions and answers, during which Moiraine is surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Anaya, the Blue Sister, performs an unfamiliar action, placing a weave on Moiraine while murmuring 3 times, "Remember what must be remembered." Following tradition, Moiraine begins to disrobe to face the test clad only in the light. With great care, she folds her clothes and places them atop her belt and pouch, hoping to conceal the secret book within. Facing the sisters and the activated ter'angreal, which now revolves slowly with a sheet of pure white light filling its opening, she puts on a mask of perfect composure and steps through. Her first test is one of composure against humiliation. She finds herself in a corridor, puts on a fine green dress in her house colours, and enters a palace courtyard. As she walks toward a 6-pointed star of brass set in the paving stones, her clothing vanishes piece by piece, leaving her completely naked. 3 brutish men emerge from an archway and advance on her, leering. She fights down her fury and shame, maintaining a steady, regal pace until her foot touches the star. She immediately embraces Saidar and completes the first required weave by creating a wall of air to trap the men. The second trial tests her ability to handle pain and multitask under pressure. She finds herself in a desolate, drought-stricken village, wearing rough farmer's woolens. As she stands on the next star, located on the rim of a dry well, and begins her second weave, she is suddenly and painfully ensnared by blackclaw bushes, their long thorns digging into her flesh. The situation worsens dramatically when she spots death's head spiders, whose bites are lethal, crawling through the branches toward her. While forced to continue the intricate primary weave, she must simultaneously divide her flows of the power to use tiny, precise weaves of fire to incinerate each spider without setting the tinder-dry bushes, and herself, on fire. The third and most violent test thrusts her into a stone-walled square, where she is immediately ambushed by a horde of Trollocs. She reaches the star just as the monstrous creatures charge, their faces a nightmare of wolves' muzzles, eagles' beaks, and boars' tusks. To survive the overwhelming assault, while also completing the crucial third weave, Moiraine devises a desperate and brilliant strategy. She begins to hum and perform the steps of a rapid court dance, using the elegant movements to evade attacks and circle the star. This allows her to maintain focus on the primary weave, while simultaneously channeling two others, hurling explosive fireballs and calling down lightning with both hands. She dances amidst the carnage, spattered with shadow-spawn blood, until all the Trollocs are destroyed. Victorious but exhausted, she sees the next star carved above an archway in the wall, an opening that leads into the dreaded Blight. Knowing it is the only way forward, she gathers herself and walks toward it. Chapter 10, it finishes. The chapter documents the harrowing conclusion of Moiraine's test to attain the Aes Sedai shawl, an ordeal consisting of 99 distinct weaves, performed within a reality-bending ter'angreal. She is thrust into a multitude of perilous environments, from a sweltering desert that saps her strength to a frigid, lightning-racked mountainside. Each location, whether a hostile swamp or a chaotic city, presents her with the six-pointed star she must find to proceed. During these trials, she is often stripped of her clothing, and sometimes finds herself bound in agonizing positions. She faces a relentless onslaught of dangers, including attacks from predatory animals, swarms of biting insects, and violent mobs of people who seek to burn, hang, or murder her. With each new scenario, her memory of the last is wiped, leaving her to wonder at her ever-increasing collection of cuts, bruises, and deep wounds, all of which contribute to a bone-deep weariness far exceeding what the magical exertions should have caused. For the final weave, a severely injured Moiraine limps into a tranquil garden where her father suddenly appears, his expression filled with worry. He pleads with her to abandon the test, claiming her mother is on her deathbed and that this is her last chance to see her alive. This represents the ultimate test of her resolve, a cruel emotional manipulation designed to make her fail. Despite her anguish, Moiraine recognizes the deception, calmly tells her father she loves him and her mother, and walks past him to the final star, completing the ordeal. Emerging from the ter'angreal, her memories come flooding back. The Mistress of Novices formally declares the test complete and a secret to be kept among those present. While receiving magical healing from a sister named Anaya, Moiraine pieces together that the trials were not entirely random. Noting the specific nature of her challenges and the displeasure on another sister's face, she deduces that Elida, a rival, had influenced the test to make it crueler and increase her chances of failure. After learning that her dear friend Siuan has just begun her own test, Moiraine waits anxiously in her room, refusing to sleep in case Siuan fails and is sent away. Siuan eventually returns, having also passed, though she is deeply flustered by an event from her own test. Their reunion is joyous, yet tinged with the realization that the shawl will create a new distance between them. In a final act of shared rebellion before their lives change forever, they agree to one last prank, placing mice in Elida's bed as retribution for her cruelty. Chapter 11, just before dawn. In the early hours before sunrise, Moiraine prepared herself for the momentous day ahead, her body heavy with fatigue after a night spent in deep contemplation rather than sleep. The sheer magnitude of the secret search she and Siuan were about to undertake had felt overwhelming in the darkness, and she yearned for her friend's company, but the ritual for this day demanded that each woman face the initial summons alone. After dressing, she was startled by a firm knock, and despite her nervousness, she maintained her composure before opening the door to 7 Aes Sedai, one from each Aja, including the stern Red Sister, Elida. Moiraine was comforted by the thought that in a short while she would be Elida's equal. Without speaking, the sisters formed a circle around her and proceeded to Siuan's room, where she was collected into their silent procession. They descended deep into the tower's foundations, the corridors unnervingly empty, until they reached the chamber of the ter'angreal used for their testing. From within the chamber, the voice of the Emelin seat, Tamra, issued a formal challenge, which Moiraine and Siuan answered in unison, declaring their purpose to swear the 3 oaths. They entered the chamber hand in hand, a display of their shared journey. Inside, the sitters of the hall stood witness. A minor complication arose, as the oval terrain was too narrow for both to pass through together. So Moiraine went first, a concession she had granted Siwan earlier. They knelt before the Emerlin, and Tamra presented the oath rod. In a clever maneuver Siwan had orchestrated, Moiraine was made to take the oaths first, thereby allowing Siwan to be the last to complete the ceremony, and technically become Aes Sedai moments after her. Moiraine felt the binding power of each of the 3 oaths settle upon her, an intensely physical sensation she described as being encased in an invisible, unyieldingly tight garment that compressed her very flesh. Siwan then took her turn, swearing the oaths with her characteristic stoicism and strength. Now officially Aes Sedai, they rose and walked together to the Blue Arja sisters, their long-planned choice finally realized. As they made their selection clear, the other Arjas departed in a stately procession until only the Blues remained. Lean and Rafella draped the blue fringed shawls over their shoulders, and they were welcomed with kisses and words from the Blue sitters. Eldra, one of the sisters, broke the formality by playfully demanding each of them bake her a pie, a quirky custom that caught Moiraine completely off guard. As Lean and Rafella escorted them to the Blue Arja's quarters, they discussed the Arja's many customs, revealing differing personalities within the group. Rafella was a zealous traditionalist, while Lean was more pragmatic and modern. Finally, upon arriving at their new home within the tower, they stepped through the doors to a startling and profound sight. Every single Blue sister currently residing in Tar Valon was lined up in the main corridor, waiting to welcome them home. Chapter 12. Entering Home. Upon their arrival in the Blue Arja's quarters, Moiraine and Siwan receive a warm welcome, initiated by Anaya, who greets them as sisters, and playfully mentions Eldra's theft of her pies. Kairen joins in, her cool blue eyes contrasting with her smile, as she hopes the 2 newcomers are poor bakers, suggesting a desire for good-natured revenge on Eldra. Moiraine, feeling a profound sense of homecoming, embraces Siwan. The Blue quarters are described with a reserved elegance, lacking the showiness of other ages, but not as plain as the browns or whites. The corridors feature simple gilded lamps and wall hangings depicting spring scenes, but the most striking feature is the floor, tiled in a wavy pattern with every shade of blue from morning sky to twilight violet. After receiving the welcome kiss from 39 sisters, they are brought before Edith, a sitter for the Blue Arja. Edith informs them that rooms, clothes, and breakfast are prepared, but she urgently needs to warn them about dangers that exist even within their own quarters, things they must understand to be safe. A pale-eyed sister named Cabriana, whose meek demeanor oddly contrasts with her fierce gaze, guides them. Moiraine learns from Anaya and Kairen that Edith is not only a sitter, but also the first selector, an unusual combination that speaks to her immense capability. Moiraine observes a subtle hierarchy among the 3 sisters, with Anaya clearly taking the lead, and notes Cabriana's strange docility. Their new apartments are spacious and well-appointed, with eclectic, polished furniture from various lands and periods, though Moiraine finds the excessive lace ruffles on the cushions and bedding distasteful. After changing into a new blue dress and securing her small notebook, Moiraine adorns herself with a kessiera, a forehead jewel, feeling that she now looks the part of Lady Moiraine Damodred, ready to navigate the hidden currents of the White Tower just as she had the Sun Palace. She and Siwan then seek out Edith, who reluctantly explains the tower's true power structure. For 6 years they were taught not to speak of a sister's strength in the one power, but now they must learn to constantly assess it. A strict hierarchy dictates that one must always show deference to any sister who is stronger, regardless of Arja, with the degree of deference increasing with the power gap. Failure to do so is a grave offense, often resulting in severe penances set by the offended sister. This revelation clarifies previously witnessed interactions and explains Cabriana's submissive behavior. Before they can fully process this, they are intercepted by Satalia Delama, a powerful, steel-grey-haired sister who dismissively calls Moiraine a porcelain doll, and immediately tests Siouan with a puzzle involving a seemingly random list of playing cards. Siouan, despite having only read about the game of arrays, correctly deduces the list represents a winning game, impressing Satalia, who promptly commandeers Siouan as her assistant, ignoring her protests about having not yet eaten breakfast. Moiraine, meanwhile, is summoned by the Amerlin seat, Tamra. On her way, Anaya offers her healing for the lingering tightness from taking the 3 oaths. Tamra, citing Moraine's experience managing her family estate, assigns her the onerous task of distributing the bounty collected for the war, effectively trapping her in Tar Valon. Later, a dejected Siouan finds an equally disheartened Moiraine. They share their misfortune, realizing their plans to leave the tower are ruined. Siouan reveals that Satalia heads the Blue Arja's network of eyes and ears, while Moiraine confesses her deepest fear. She believes the Hall of the Tower intends to place her on the Sun Throne of Carrion. She explains her dread of becoming a ruler like her ruthless great-grandmother Carowyn, forced into a life of assassination and conspiracy. As Moiraine despairs, Siouan kneels beside her, offering comfort and promising they will find a way out of their predicament. The chapter concludes with a shift in perspective to Lan at the end of the Isle War. The Aiel have retreated into the mountains known as Kinslayer's Dagger, and the army's commander, Pedron Nile, wisely chooses not to pursue them into such treacherous terrain. Lan feels the pull of his own personal war far to the north. His companion, Bukama, urges him to rest for at least a year, but Lan is restless and concedes only to 4 months. They turn their horses south, intending to travel through softer lands, but making a point to avoid Tar Valon and its Aes Sedai. Chapter 13. Business in the City. Following Siouan's healing, she and Moiraine decided against having food brought to their rooms, instead attending their first meal as full Aes Sedai in the sisters' main dining hall. This was a significant moment, as the grand, high-ceilinged room, adorned with winter tapestries and gold leaf, was a space accepted could enter only by special invitation. Proudly wearing their new shawls, they drew some amused glances from other sisters, which caused Moiraine a moment of embarrassment, though she remained determined to wear the symbol of her new station at every opportunity. Siouan, by contrast, carried herself with regal confidence, adjusting her own shawl to draw attention to it. The experience was a stark departure from their time as accepted. Instead of common benches and basic pottery, they sat in elegantly carved chairs and were served on fine Tarrabona porcelain by a dedicated serving woman. While Siouan complained about the seasoning on her fish, she ate it all, whereas Moiraine, consumed by her inner turmoil, had little appetite, managing only some bread and tea. She felt trapped by the task assigned by the Amerlin seat, her only comfort being the slim possibility that the Hall of the Tower might yet deem the plan to make her Queen of Carhian unworkable. Upon returning to their quarters, Adith presented each of them with a letter of rights for 1,000 gold crowns, their new annual stipend from the tower. Siouan was stunned by the immense sum, an amount her father never could have earned in his lifetime, and she chose to deposit it with the tower's bank for maximum security. Moiraine, however, having been raised with wealth, immediately set out to visit her own private banker. She hired a sedan chair and travelled to a tastefully opulent building to meet with Mistress Elaine Dormail. After initial pleasantries and congratulations on her new shawl, Mistress Dormail revealed the true purpose of a letter she had recently sent. She recounted how 9 days prior, a man posing as a Tower Guard captain named Rhys Gorthanes had attempted to investigate Moiraine's finances using a forged order from the Amerlin. The banker described him as a tall, handsome Carhinen noble with a distinctive scar near his eye. Mistress Dormail, recognizing the forgery, had him detained, but he later escaped by bribing a footman. The banker dealt with this internal breach of security harshly but discreetly. For Moiraine, this news was a chilling confirmation. It meant the Hall was already moving forward with their plan for her, and someone outside the tower had discovered it. She maintained her composure, but inwardly her resolve to find a way out solidified. She authorized a payment to the banker for her trouble and gave a set of private instructions before leaving. The following day, Moraine convinced a grumbling Siwan to accompany her to the city's finest seamstress, a Domani woman named Tamore Alcohima. The visit further highlighted their differing perspectives. Siwan was parsimonious, questioning the cost of the sedan chair and wanting only a few practical wool dresses. Moiraine, however, was playing a longer game. She ordered 20 expensive silk dresses, half of them tailored for riding, to create the appearance that she was settling into a long residency in Tarvalon and lull the hall into a false sense of security. The interaction with the seamstress was a delicate negotiation of its own. Moraine had to quietly instruct Siwan on the proper etiquette, explaining that with an artisan of Tamore's caliber, one does not haggle over price and must show a degree of deference. For making the seamstress wait, Moiraine knew there would be a subtle price. Her first dresses would likely be in the lighter shades she disliked, and the fit of Siwan's garment would be snugger than she wanted. As her final act, Moiraine placed a separate order for 5 more riding dresses, these in a dark, distinctively Cairhienin style, with minimal house markings. She specifically requested they be made last and stipulated that they would be picked up personally, completing the second part of her preparations for a potential escape. Chapter 14 changes. Upon being raised to the shawl, Moraine and Siwan quickly discovered that their education was far from over. They were now subjected to hours of instruction in the labyrinthine customs of the Blue Aja, a body of tradition accreted over 3,000 years. Siwan, with her remarkable memory, had already absorbed much of this from a previous conversation, leaving Moiraine to struggle to catch up. The rules were numerous and often seemingly trivial, yet carried the weight of law. For instance, a blue sister was forbidden from wearing the colour red in her clothing within the tower, a custom born from an ancient and now forgotten animosity with the Red Aja. This rivalry was so ingrained that the two Ajas opposed each other reflexively in the hall of the tower, sometimes grinding proceedings to a halt. Moiraine was startled to learn of such open enmity, but it was only one piece of a complex political puzzle. The blue and green Ajas enjoyed a long-standing accord, but tensions existed with the white and yellow Ajas, with accusations of interference in Altara a century prior still poisoning relations. These alliances and rivalries were a constantly shifting web, where the brown Aja might support the white against the blue in one matter, and the blue against the yellow in another. Understanding this intricate political landscape, which Moraine found more complex than the courtly game of houses, was essential for survival. Their training in the power also resumed, now under the tutelage of senior blue sisters, who taught them weaves deemed too sensitive for accepted, such as the Warder Bond and others known only to the Blue Aja. This sparked Moiraine's curiosity, leading her to speculate that every Aja, and perhaps individual sisters, possessed secret weaves. She herself had concealed her first self-taught weave from the tower, a testament to the secretive nature she learned in the Sun Palace. She even wondered if Siwan harbored similar secrets, though it was a question too delicate to ask. One particular technique, a mental trick to ignore heat and cold, proved difficult for Moiraine. Despite Natasia's explanation that it was a simple matter of focused breathing and mental detachment, Moiraine's concentration would frequently slip, causing her to gasp as the cold rushed back in, earning her a reputation as a distracted dreamer. Siwan, predictably, mastered the skill almost instantly. The turning of the year was marked by the Feast of Lights, a joyous celebration that filled Moiraine with melancholy as she contemplated the many empty, unused chambers in the tower, a stark symbol of its dwindling numbers. She received a flurry of invitations from powerful Cairhienin families, a clear sign the hall was maneuvering to place her on the Sun Throne, but she defiantly burned them, choosing to hide from her political destiny. During the feast, their new dresses arrived. Moraine's were mostly in shades of blue, many of them lighter than she preferred, while Siwan's were cut to flatter her figure, a detail Siwan seemed not to notice. Siwan herself was struggling with her own assigned task. growing daily more irritable under the command of the senior sister Cetalia. She eventually confessed to Moiraine that Cetalia was working her relentlessly, a frustration so profound it nearly caused her to break the first oath against speaking an untruth. Meanwhile, Moiraine was trapped in her own form of drudgery, spending hours each morning in a windowless room signing off on Clark reports for the bounty distribution, a task she recognized as a deliberate ploy to keep her tethered to Tar Valon. Her frustration grew as the camps of women who might have seen the babe dwindled, and she secretly resolved to run away if necessary to escape the fate the Hall planned for her. The tower's slow decline was further highlighted when Elid, an accepted Moiraine had known, died during her test for the shawl. Though the tower never advertised its failures, a day of quiet mourning was observed. In contrast, Sheriam was successfully raised to the shawl shortly after, and, to Moiraine and Siwan's delight, chose the blue Arja. Moiraine cautioned a jubilant Siwan against bringing their former friend into their secret search, arguing that Sheriam's gossipy nature, though not malicious, would inevitably lead to dangerous hints being dropped. The joy of this reunion was shattered days later by the announcement that Tamra Ospenya, the Amerlin's seat, had died peacefully in her sleep. Moiraine was stunned, and her genuine grief was immediately tainted by a flicker of selfish hope that this might free her from the Hall's schemes. Disgusted with herself for this thought, which she blamed on her Damodred blood and ingrained political cunning, she set herself a penance. For Tamra's funeral, she wore a pale blue dress so intricately embroidered that it was shockingly revealing, deliberately inviting the disapproval of the other sisters as a mortification of her spirit. During the rites, she offered a tearful and heartfelt eulogy, her admiration for the fallen Amerlin entirely sincere. In the aftermath, a new Amerlin, Sierin Vayu of the Grey Arja, was raised. Her reign began with chilling severity. She offered no traditional indulgences, dismissed every male clerk in the tower, and subjected 2 sisters to public birching in the Traitor's Court, an event Moiraine was forced to witness. The new keeper of the Chronicles and mistress of novices were both from the Red Arja, a sign of a significant power shift within the tower. Moiraine, convinced none of Tamra's searchers would reveal their mission to this harsh new leader, went to Sierin to request release from her duties with the bounty. Sierin granted the request, but then explicitly ordered her to remain in Tar Valon, stating that she would soon be needed. This command was the final catalyst for Moiraine's escape. After a brief, heartfelt goodbye with Siwan, she left the tower on the pretense of a short ride, cleverly deflecting the concerns of other sisters. Her flight was a carefully executed plan. She rode first to a banker to collect letters of rights and gold, then to her seamstress to change into the guise of a minor Cairienin noblewoman, removing her great serpent ring to complete her disguise. After purchasing necessary supplies, she made her way to North Harbour and secured passage for herself and her horse aboard a river ship called the Blue Wing. As the vessel pulled away from the docks, she embraced the power and saw a man watching her from the shore, the same tall, scarred man the banker had described as an agent of her family's political rivals. She realized with a chill that she was being hunted by a potential assassin. Yet, as Tar Valon shrank in the distance, Moiraine felt not fear, but a profound sense of freedom and excitement. She had escaped the tower's control, defied the new Amerlin, and was finally embarking on her true quest to find the infant boy, an adventure grander than any she had imagined. Chapter 15, Into Canloom. Lan Mandragoran, along with his companion Bukama, returns to the northern borderland nation of Kandor, a land defined by its proximity to the corrupting influence of the Blight. The season is a stark and unforgiving early spring, a world away from the gentler climes of the south, where they have spent the last 2 years. The landscape is coloured by the first hints of new growth on the trees and a scattering of wildflowers, but the air remains bitingly cold and the sun offers little warmth. Lan reflects internally that the south may have softened him, a dangerous vulnerability for a man who considers the Blight his home and his destiny. He feels the constant, magnetic pull of the corrupted land to the north. A personal war he abandoned for a time, but which has been calling him back with increasing intensity. The road to the city of Kanluum is busy with commercial traffic, from farmers in bright embroidered clothing celebrating their recent market success to more subdued merchant trains with hired guards. A palpable tension hangs in the air. The people are wary of strangers, a consequence of a recent spike in banditry, increased trouble from the blight, and unsettling rumors of a man who can channel the one power. As they walk their horses toward the city, the two men draw considerable attention. Their height, worn clothing, well-maintained weapons, and especially the braided leather cord, the hadori, holding back their long hair, mark them as Malkieri. Bukama, already in a foul mood from a stone-bruised hoof on his horse, grumbles at the suspicious stares, his irritation nearly provoking a confrontation with some merchant guards. Lan, however, remains silent and inwardly focused, his senses on high alert while his thoughts are consumed by the blight. He acknowledges that his 2 years away, fighting alongside the Ale, were a necessary distraction, but ultimately a delay from his true purpose. He feels he has been away from his personal war for far too long. Their arrival at the gates of Kanluum escalates the tension. The city is formidably fortified, a testament to its proximity to danger. While the guards are initially just performing their duty, one young guard has a shocking moment of recognition, exclaiming Lan's name and greeting him with the formal respect due to the uncrowned king of the lost nation of Malkia. This act of reverence incites a furious reaction from Bukama, who verbally and physically accosts the young man. Bukama furiously admonishes him for daring to claim a Malkieri heritage while wearing the short hair and insignia of a Kandori lord, revealing his own deep-seated, bitter adherence to the traditions of their fallen kingdom. The situation becomes volatile until an officer named Aline Soroku intervenes. Soroku, a veteran of the Blight, also recognizes Lan and offers a formal, if cautious, welcome. He explains the city is on edge due to recent murders and whispers of shadow spawn within the walls. To de-escalate the conflict without shaming his friend, Lan waits, and Bukama, in a moment that shocks both Lan and Soroku, takes full responsibility and swears a solemn oath by his mother's name not to draw his sword within the city. This profound act of self-control is followed by a formal, fatalistic exchange between Lan and Soroku, acknowledging that true peace for Borderlanders is only found in death. Inside the bustling city, Lan observes a world teeming with life, but layered with strange new developments. He notes an unusual number of Aes Sedai and consciously avoids them, wary of their practice of bonding warders, sometimes without a man's full consent. More shockingly, he sees women wearing lace veils, a fashion that flouts the strict borderland law against hiding one's face. What unsettles Lan most, however, is Bukama's profound silence. His companion, who would normally erupt at such sights, says nothing. He does not even react to the sight of Nazar Kuranin, a man of Malkieri blood who has clearly abandoned the old ways, a sight that should have sent Bukama into a sputtering rage. This unnatural quiet is more alarming to Lan than any outburst. As they head toward the high hill where the nobility resides, Lan decides to divert their path. He wishes to avoid the inevitable week of hollow ceremonies and social obligations with Lord Markasiev, but more urgently, he fears what the deeply disturbed Bukama might do if provoked further, despite his oath. Bukama's silent acquiescence to this change of plan only deepens Lan's worry. The chapter concludes with Lan's grim realization that both he and his oldest friend have lost their vital edge and must find a way to sharpen themselves before they are truly ready to face the blight again. Chapter 16, The Deeps. Lan and his companion, Bukama, venture into a northern district of the city known as the Deeps, a stark contrast to the more opulent areas they have left behind. This section of town is devoid of grand palaces, instead crowded with the functional establishments of common life such as taverns, inns, and warehouses. The streets, though narrow and unsuitable for carriages, are just as teeming with activity and noise as the city's main thoroughfares. Amidst the clamour of merchants and street performers, Lan senses the pervasive presence of thieves, and after his coat is subtly brushed by unseen hands for a second time, he prudently secures his coin purse beneath his shirt. Their search for lodging proves difficult, as the first 3 inns they approach are completely full, packed with lesser merchants and their guards. Finally, at a 4th inn called the Blue Rose, Lan enters, determined to find a place to rest. Inside the bustling common room, the innkeeper, a striking greying woman named Russell, immediately recognizes Bukama. Her reaction is a dramatic and public mix of affection and fury. She pulls him down for a long, thorough kiss, only to then strike him hard across the jaw for a 6-year absence without any word. She follows the blow with another, even more possessive kiss, demonstrating a fiery nature that captivates the attention of the other patrons. During this spectacle, Lan is greeted by his oldest friend, Rhine Venamar, another Malchieri distinguished by the silver bells woven into his hair and adorning his clothing. As they sit, a serving maid named Lyra makes a brazenly forward proposition to Lan, which he attempts to politely decline in accordance with his stoic Malchieri upbringing. Her aggressive response and Rhine's subsequent commentary highlight Lan's unintended effect on women. The conversation takes a grave turn when Rhine reveals the true reason for the recent strange encounters and the charged atmosphere. Erdain Arrel, a woman from Lan's past, has raised the Golden Crane, the war banner of their lost nation, Malkia. She is gathering an army in Lan's name, intending to carve their homeland out of the blight. This revelation profoundly disturbs Lan, who retreats to the stables to contemplate its implications. There, he enters a meditative state, the Kodi, to quiet the storm of emotions the news has unleashed. He reflects on the oath sworn in his name, to avenge Malkia, and the futility he perceives in leading men to die for a kingdom that is already gone. His thoughts drift to Edain, his first lover, or Carnera, bound to him by a powerful tradition that she is now clearly using to manipulate events and people, including him. Bukama joins him, warning Lan that Edain will use their shared customs and her connection to him as a set of reins to control his actions. As they emerge from the stable, their discussion is violently interrupted by an ambush. 6 men with drawn swords attack. Lan, displaying his legendary prowess, orders the unarmed Bukama back into the stable for safety and confronts the attackers alone. Entering the void of combat, he moves with deadly grace, flowing through the sword forms. Though he sustains several wounds, he methodically and efficiently kills all 6 of his assailants. In the aftermath, Rhine identifies 2 of the dead men as followers of Edain, speculating that she may have left orders to have Lan killed should the rumours of his death prove false, thereby allowing her to become the undisputed leader of the new Malchieri army. This grim possibility solidifies Lan's resolve. He announces his intention to ride to Chachin at dawn to face Edain, a confrontation he believes will be far more difficult than facing the blight itself. Rhine, intrigued and seeking to see the Golden Crane fly again, decides to ride with him. Chapter 17. An Arrival. 3 months after leaving Tarvalon, Moiraine finds her grand quest for the prophesied child has devolved into a tedious and frustrating journey. Saddle-sore and constrained by the 3 oaths, her current investigation takes her to a house of mourning in the cold city of Canluum in Kandor. Disguised as a minor noblewoman named Lady Alice, she offers condolences to Jarina Najima, a woman whose husband and 3 sons perished in a sudden and inexplicable stable fire. Jarine repeats her story of disbelief, questioning how her famously careful and lucky husband could have been caught in such a blaze. Moiraine offers hollow, practiced comforts about the pattern and the will of the light, all while feeling a private wince at how unconvincing she sounds due to her youth. Internally, she is impatient, wanting only to confirm the details of the deaths and move on. The most crucial detail is that Jarine's infant son, Jared, was born nearly 20 miles from the correct location, a fact that brings Moiraine a grim sense of relief that she dislikes admitting even to herself. The dead child is not the one she seeks. After leaving the grieving family, Moiraine walks through the bustling, frigid streets of Canlum. She navigates the diverse crowd, using her noble disguise to her advantage, at one point flashing the slashed fabric on her dress to deter an overly forward Tyran man. She is acutely aware of her vulnerability and isolation, spotting two other Aes Sedai from a distance and carefully avoiding them, contemplating whether she should adopt a veil to better conceal her identity. Her destination is the city's finest inn, the Gates of Heaven, a place she now regrets choosing. Upon entering the common room, she finds it is host to no fewer than 5 Aes Sedai, their presence creating islands of empty space around their tables in the otherwise packed room. Moiraine has been maintaining a precarious deception that she is a wilder, a woman who learned to channel on her own and has no interest in the White Tower, a story that the other sisters have thus far accepted. As she tries to slip away to her room, she is intercepted by 2 Aes Sedai, who know her from the tower, Laurel Tarsi and Moiraine. Her identity is immediately compromised, and her fear of being discovered and forcibly summoned back to Tarvalon spikes. Before the situation can fully unravel, however, a far more formidable presence intervenes. Cadsuane Melaidrin, a legendary and fearsome sister of the Green Ajar, appears on the staircase and takes absolute command. She dismisses Moiraine's attempts at evasion and orders her, Laurel, and Moiraine into a private room. There, Cadsuane subjects Moiraine to a humiliating interrogation, forcing Laurel and Marian to recount details of her high-spirited and prank-filled youth with Siouan Sanche, including a story about sneaking mice into another sister's bed. Cadsuane then delivers a shocking lecture, breaking Tower custom by openly discussing the dwindling number of powerful channelers and naming the strongest living sisters. She identifies Moiraine as possessing potential to be among the very strongest in a century, but deems her currently a naive and ignorant, pretty little doll in need of protection. Asserting her authority, Cadsuane commands Laurel and Moiraine to escort Moiraine on their journey to Chachan, completely overriding their protests. Moiraine is left stunned and powerless, her mission stalled, wondering if this legendary woman is somehow connected to Tamra's secret search. Chapter 18, A Narrow Passage. Upon re-entering the common room after her encounter with the 3 Aes Sedai, Moiraine found herself the subject of sympathetic glances from other patrons who misunderstood her summons as a prelude to punishment. Her disorientation was compounded by the absence of Cadsuane and the others, leaving her with a torrent of unanswered questions and a deep longing for the steadying presence of her friend, Siouan Sanche. In a startling moment of what she first dismissed as wishful thinking, she spotted Siouan herself peeking into the inn. Instead of a warm greeting, however, Siouan gave a subtle nod up the street before vanishing, prompting a worried Moiraine to follow. Her mind raced with dreadful possibilities, chief among them that their secret mission had been exposed to their superior, Sierin, who had dispatched Siouan to bring her back for punishment. Moiraine followed Siouan into a narrow, dusty alley, where her friend's usual composure was shattered by visible fear. Siouan immediately dispensed with Moiraine's assumptions, asking desperately if she had found the prophesied child. Before Moiraine could fully process the question, Siouan broke down, revealing a horrifying truth. 5 of the other sisters sent by the previous Amelin, Tamra, to search for the dragon reborn were dead. She listed them by name: Aisha, Karine, Valera, Ludus, and Malin. All of their deaths officially attributed to accidents or natural causes. Siouan then recounted the particularly chilling circumstances of Malin's demise. She had hidden under Malin's bed in the White Tower to speak with her in secret, only for Malin to never return to her room all night. The next morning, it was announced that Malin had been found dead in that very bed, with no marks on her body, a clear indication that the one power had been used to kill her. This evidence led Siouan to a terrible conclusion. Tamra herself had not died peacefully in her sleep as was claimed. She must have been secretly interrogated with the power, murdered to conceal the questioning, and now her killers were systematically eliminating every sister involved in the search. Their goal was to prevent the Dragon Reborn from being found, and to ensure he would not be present at the last battle. Moiraine, forcing herself to confront the unthinkable, gave voice to the only explanation. The Black Ager, a secret society of sisters sworn to the Dark One, was operating within the White Tower. They decided they could trust no one. Moiraine devised a plan for Siouan to leave immediately for their next destination, Chachin, while she would remain until morning to create a false trail and gain a day's head start. After an emotional farewell, where Moiraine gave Siouan much of her money, they parted ways. Returning to the inn, Moiraine's perspective was irrevocably altered. She now saw potential dark friends in every stranger and viewed every normal interaction with suspicion. The innkeeper, no longer deferential to Lady Alice, now that he believed her a mere wilder destined for the tower, informed her she would have to share her room. Her new roommate, a garrulous merchant, proved an insufferable nuisance. After a restless night filled with nightmares and a brief, unnerving visit from Cadsuan checking on her, Moiraine decided she could wait no longer. In the dark hours of the morning, while her roommate snored, she quietly gathered a few essential belongings into the pockets of her cloak, abandoning the rest of her possessions to avoid suspicion, and slipped out of the inn. Chapter 19. Pondwater. Moiraine initiates a clandestine departure from her inn at the earliest light of dawn, aiming to escape the watchful eyes of Cadsuan. The common room is deserted, allowing her to slip into the stable yard undetected. There she encounters a groom named Kazin, whom she bribes with a silver penny, a sum likely far greater than his usual earnings, to saddle her mare, Arrow. This calculated generosity, combined with leaving her pack horse behind to mimic a simple morning ride, is a strategic move designed to delay the discovery of her true departure for as long as possible. As she rides through the well-lit and heavily patrolled streets of the borderland city, a necessity so close to the Blight, she notes the pervasive sense of caution that defines the region. At the western gate, her journey takes an unexpected turn when she finds she is not the first to depart. 3 imposing, heavily armed men are already waiting impatiently for the gates to open. She identifies 2 as Malkieri by the leather cords in their hair, and the 3rd as an Arafelin with belled braids, a man she distinctly remembers seeing at her inn. Recognizing they are traveling in the same direction, a spark of curiosity and purpose ignites within her. She decides to follow them, believing they may possess information about Cadsuan. She cleverly uses a large merchant train as a buffer, maintaining a discreet distance as they all head out onto the open road. The pursuit is fast-paced, as the 3 men ride with an expertise that forces her to remain alert. Throughout the day, Moiraine internally debates the best way to approach them. She is acutely aware of the dangers. They could be simple brigands or, far worse, dark friends. A direct confrontation risks revealing that she is an Aes Sedai, which would send out ripples of information and potentially attract the very person she is fleeing. Her internal conflict is resolved when the men separate. The Arafelin and the older Malkieri ride on ahead, while the younger Malkieri, a man named Lan, takes the pack horse and ventures into the woods to establish a camp. Seizing this opportunity to deal with a single individual, she follows his trail to a secluded pond. Finding Lan in a state of quiet meditation, Moiraine attempts to gain an advantage through surprise, using the One Power to silently lift his sword from his side. His reaction, however, is inhumanly swift. Before she can comprehend his movement, he uncoils, grabs her, and hurls her into the freezing water of the pond. The shock of the icy immersion is total. Lan helps her out, not with an apology, but with a practical, almost detached offer of a fire and blankets. Behind this screen of privacy, Moiraine secretly uses the power to dry herself completely. The encounter reveals Lan as a man of extraordinary reflexes and a stoic, unreadable nature. When the others return, a crass remark from the Arafelin, Rhine, about her prompts Lan to draw his sword in her defense, exposing a complex and unexpected code of honor. Later that night, after overhearing Lan express his mistrust of Aes Sedai, An enraged Moiraine retaliates by using the power to inundate him with the pond's water. The resulting chaos forces her to reveal her identity, and the men react with a mixture of awe and fear. Lan's response is the most telling. Dripping wet, he simply sits back down in the mud to resume his watch, a silent act of profound defiance and resilience that establishes a new, tense dynamic for the journey ahead. Chapter 20. Breakfast in Manala. The mysterious woman accompanying Lan and his companions reveals her name as Lady Alice upon waking, though Lan is profoundly skeptical of her identity. He internally analyzes her behavior, noting that she lacks the serene and ageless composure characteristic of a true Aes Sedai. He recalls seeing a flash of childish delight on her face during a previous incident, a stark contrast to the cold, controlled anger he knows sisters to possess. He believes she is feigning her status, despite her producing a great serpent ring. Meanwhile, Bukama, who had initially suspected she might be an assassin sent by their enemy Edain, now frets over matters of propriety. He repeatedly chides Lan for not formally pledging his protection to the woman, viewing it as a dishonorable failing. Bukama's own pledge has already bound them to escort her to Chachin. The third companion, Rhine, is utterly captivated by Alice, offering her flowery compliments and nervously flirting while assisting with her horse. Lan understands the attraction, but recognizes traits of a manipulative Kahainen in her, a combination he considers exceptionally dangerous based on his own perilous past experiences in that nation. Upon Alice's firm command, the group stops for a hot meal in the village of Manala, which is in the midst of a vibrant Beltane festival. The joyous scene of dancing and celebration is juxtaposed with a grim display of 6 severed Trolloc heads on stakes, a stark reminder of the nearby blight. Alice observes the heads with a strange, unreadable calm, remarking that she has faced such creatures before, a claim that startles Lan as few Southerners have ever encountered Shadowspawn. When pressed for details, she becomes evasive and coolly dismissive. Inside an inn, the 3 men argue quietly about her motives. Rhine is convinced she is Aes Sedai and urges caution. Bukama is worried about being entangled in her schemes, and Lan maintains his theory that she is a wilder sent to watch him. Their debate is cut short when they realize Alice has vanished from the room without making a sound. Lan, concerned she may be arranging a trap, goes searching for her and finds her speaking with a local woman. He stealthily moves closer and overhears Alice inquiring about someone named Avene Sahara. Alice, however, senses his presence despite his quiet approach and confronts him with a chilling threat about the White Tower's punishment for eavesdroppers. She icily commands him to forget the name and mind his own affairs, finishing with a sharp insult about the reliability of a Malkieri's word before stalking away. Chapter 21. Some Tricks of the Power. The journey to Chachin proved to be as arduous as Lan had anticipated, defined by relentless riding and meagre comforts. The group, lacking the funds for inn-stays, frequently slept outdoors or in barns, pressing onward past merchant caravans. Their path wound through forested hills where isolated farms were non-existent, as such places in the borderlands invariably became tombs. Throughout their travels, Alice persisted in her search for a woman named Sahara in every village, growing quiet and frosty whenever the men approached her during these inquiries. Her icy demeanor was a constant, particularly towards Lan, though Rhine seemed both captivated and terrified by her, offering compliments and service, which she accepted as her due. Alice was also relentlessly inquisitive, probing into the personal histories of all 3 men with a persistence Lan found as irritating as a swarm of biting insects. The men, however, maintained their privacy, deflecting her interrogations as was customary for men who believed a person's past was their own affair. Alongside Alice's probing, Bukama's constant complaints about the pledge continued unabated, a ceaseless source of friction. The journey was further complicated by nature itself when 2 powerful storms descended from the Blight. As the first tempest approached, Lan sought shelter, but Alice coolly asserted her protection. She then created an invisible dome of the one power that moved with them, deflecting the torrential, freezing rain and dangerously large hailstones in an eerie silence. She repeated this feat during the second storm, yet seemed strangely taken aback by their expressions of gratitude, her face an almost perfect imitation of an Aes Sedai's serenity. The travellers also encountered the rumoured bandits, small groups who would appear with arrows ready, but retreat upon seeing the prepared warriors. On their fourth day, however, they were confronted by a much larger force of nearly 50 men who blocked the road from both front and rear. As Lan prepared for a battle, he knew they could not win. The bandit leader offered them a chance to surrender their valuables. Before Lan could respond, Alice intervened with a voice like thunder, declaring herself an Aes Sedai and punctuating her threat with an explosion of red fire above the bandits' heads. This display terrified the attackers, with one even identifying her as a Green Arja sister with her warders. Though their leader attempted to rally them, Lan capitalized on their fear with a bold bluff, starting a 10 count that sent the entire band fleeing into the woods. Afterward, Alice was indignant, arguing that she could have defeated all 50 men and that they should have fought them to bring them to justice. Her profound overestimation of her abilities against such numbers struck Lan as a sign of a very strange and naive woman. Alice's strangeness also manifested in a series of petty torments directed at Lan, retribution for his earlier act of dunking her in the river. Each night brought a new trial. She used the power to keep him awake with invisible flicks, filled his clothing and boots with sand, and even orchestrated a simultaneous attack by ants inside his small clothes. She later used blister leaf on him, an act that nearly broke his stoic composure. Lan endured these escalating pranks in silence, believing a woman had the right to set the price for an insult, but he began to fear that her true intention was a slow, agonizing death. From Moiraine's perspective, these actions were merely attempts to extract a proper, abject apology and force Lan to acknowledge her authority as an Aes Sedai. His unyielding arrogance and stoicism only infuriated her and fueled her creativity, though a part of her secretly admired his fortitude. She was also frustrated by the men's general reticence, which fed her suspicion that they might be dark friends, prompting her to continue warding them each night. 2 days from their destination, in the village of Ravinda, Moiraine finally located Aveni Sahara, only to discover that her son was born at the wrong time and place to be the dragon reborn. The men's obvious relief at the swiftness of her inquiry rekindled her irritation, and she began plotting her next act of revenge on Lan. Her thoughts were interrupted when an arrow suddenly struck Lan in the shoulder. Moiraine reacted instantly, embracing the source to shield him and then herself, before using flows of air to seize the hidden archer. Before she could secure him, however, Rhine and Bukama fired their own bows, killing the man instantly. Moiraine was dismayed, feeling she had inadvertently assisted in an execution. The dead man, identified as Canidrin, had disobeyed his orders to kill her first, choosing instead to target Lan, whom he clearly viewed as the greater threat. A search of his belongings revealed a purse full of golden crowns from Caerhien, a chilling link to her own homeland, and a stark valuation of her life. Following this, Bukama brutally pulled the arrow through Lan's shoulder, an act Lan endured with only a blink of his eyes. The men's refusal to ask for healing exasperated Moiraine, until Bukama muttered that Lan would need his arm in Chachin, which finally convinced Lan to accept. He did so not by asking, but by simply leaning forward. Moiraine healed him with a force that was close to a slap, finding satisfaction in the convulsion it caused. As they prepared to leave, Lan showed an unexpected moment of compassion by freeing the assassin's horse so it could find forage. This small act surprised Moiraine, prompting her to abandon her plan involving wasps, though she remained determined to crack his formidable composure before they reached Chachin. Chapter 22. Keeping Custom. The narrative opens with Lan Mandragoran and his two companions, Bukama and Rhine, arriving at the city of Chachin, which is described as a metropolis of mountains rather than hills, crowned by the magnificent Aes Daisha Palace. As they cross one of the city's many bridges, Lan is intensely relieved to have reached his destination. primarily because he wishes to be rid of the woman Alice, whose company on the road has left him covered in itchy bites from fleas and black flies. He curtly dismisses her, refusing her payment for his protection and feeling a flare of irritation at his own loss of self-control. His companions react differently. Rhine offers effusive apologies while Bukama grumbles about poor manners. Lan, troubled by the possibility that Alice might truly be an Aes Sedai, gallops away into the bustling city streets, seeking to focus on the formidable challenge that awaits him with Edain. The journey up to the palace is slow, navigating through the chaotic city and then the more opulent upper levels, filled with the coaches of the wealthy. Lan feels as though he is marching onto a battlefield, and his worn, blood-stained clothing contrasts sharply with the splendor around him. Upon reaching the palace gates, they are initially barred by guards, but an officer named Jurad Shimon, an old acquaintance, recognizes Lan and welcomes him with profound respect, using the formal address Taishar Malkia, a clear sign that Edain's influence has preceded him. The Shatayan of the palace herself, Mistress Romera, greets him, an exceptional honor that underscores the high expectations surrounding his visit. True to custom, Lan first ensures his men are settled into their quarters before being shown to his own spacious rooms. Here, he learns from his new serving woman, Anya, that Lady Edain Arrel is indeed in residence. Preparing himself as if for battle, Lan washes and dons his finest black silk coat embroidered with golden blood roses, then enters a state of emotionless calm to await the inevitable confrontation. He strategically refuses Edain's first summons and burns her subsequent commanding letter, though he observes that his own servant seems to be an ally of Edain. Eventually, Lan is formally summoned to meet the prince consort Bryce in what he assumes will be a private meeting. Instead, he is led into a grand hall filled with Kandori nobility and, significantly, a large number of Malkieri exiles who still wear the traditional Hadori and Kisain. They greet him with deep bows and curtsies, creating a palpable sense of political theatre. After a warm personal reunion with Bryce, Lan is brought before Edain. In a stunning and masterful public maneuver, she kneels and loudly pledges fealty to him as the true Lord of Malkia, effectively anointing him king. The room erupts in supportive cheers, and Lan finds himself completely ensnared by her gambit. Bryce later pulls him aside to a private balcony, expressing his disapproval of Edain's political machinations, but Lan understands that he is trapped. The final confrontation occurs when Lan returns to his chambers to find Edain waiting for him alone. She asserts her traditional power over him as his Karnera, compelling him to present her with his dowry, a symbolic cord woven from his own hair that he gave her years ago. He kneels before her, holding it out as custom demands. Rather than taking it, she leads him to the balcony and points to her 17-year-old daughter Izel in the garden below. Edain then declares that it is time he was married and that, as his closest female relation, it is her duty to arrange the match, making her scandalous intention to marry him to her own daughter terrifyingly clear. Horrified, Lan protests, but she uses the power granted to her by custom and the dowry he holds to neutralize his resistance. She leads him to the bed, maintaining her complete advantage and leaving him with the chilling certainty that he has no way to avoid the marriage she has orchestrated. Chapter 23. The Evening Star. Following her interaction with Lan, Moiraine purposefully guides her horse, Arrow, into the more impoverished and dangerous districts of the city of Chachin. Her reasoning is rooted in her intimate knowledge of her friend Siwan's frugal nature. She surmises that Siwan would seek out the cheapest possible accommodations in areas less likely to be frequented by other Aes Sedai. The neighborhood she enters is one of stark contrasts, with brightly tiled roofs adorning shabby, decaying stone buildings. She observes an atmosphere of desperation and suspicion, where shopkeepers guard their wares with clubs and every passerby is viewed as a potential thief. Moiraine's own fine silk dress and fur-lined cloak attract unwanted attention, making her an obvious target. After dismounting before a dilapidated inn called the Ruffled Goose, she is forced to use the One Power to invisibly protect her mare from a covetous young woman attempting to steal the animal. Moiraine subtly weaves hobbles of air for Arrow's feet and places a protective ward around her. After a brief and fruitless inquiry inside the foul-smelling inn, she emerges to find the woman still struggling with the horse. Following a confrontation, Moiraine uses a sharp, invisible strike of air to punish the would-be thief for insulting Arrow, a small act of personal justice that leaves the woman baffled and in pain. Moiraine's search continues through other squalid inns with no success until she reaches the Silver Penny. Here, the innkeeper, a deceptively pleasant woman named Nidare Sataroff, confirms that a Tyrene woman matching Siwan's description is staying there and offers Moiraine a mug of spiced wine while she waits. Moiraine's suspicion is immediately aroused by a flicker of anticipation in the woman's expression and the fact that wine is an unlikely luxury in such a poor area. Embracing the source, she employs a secret blue Aja weave of spirit to probe the innkeeper's emotions, confirming her unease and then terror. Moiraine then uses the power to compel the woman to drink the drugged wine herself. Mistress Sataroff collapses to the floor, paralyzed by her own concoction, leaving her vulnerable to the predatory patrons of her establishment. Moiraine departs, reflecting that justice can sometimes manifest outside of established laws. Her day is filled with further perils, including fending off multiple attacks from men trying to steal her horse and avoiding several more suspicious offers of drugged wine, all while being careful not to reveal her identity as an Aes Sedai. Just as dusk begins to settle, Siwan appears and hurries Moiraine away from the dangerous streets. To Moiraine's surprise, Siwan has secured a room at a respectable and clean inn called the Evening Star, which caters primarily to female merchants and is far more comfortable than Moiraine had anticipated. In the privacy of their room, Siwan shares two critical pieces of information. The first is a promising lead. She has located a woman named Inez Demain, who gave birth to a son and named him Rahien after witnessing the dawn over Dragonmount, a significant potential link to the Dragon Reborn prophecy. The challenge, however, is that Lady Inez is residing within the heavily guarded Astaishar Palace. The second piece of news is more ominous. Siwan recounts the recent death of a popular young blacksmith who was found with his back broken, but with a large sum of money he was carrying for charity left completely untouched. The nature of the death and the absence of robbery strongly suggest the involvement of the One Power, raising the terrifying possibility that the Black Aja is active in Chachin. Moiraine remains skeptical about connecting a blacksmith's death to their quest, but Siwan cautions that ignoring such signs could be fatal. The chapter concludes with the two women resolving to find a way to question Lady Inez in the palace, despite the immense risks involved. Chapter 24. Making use of invisibility. The chapter commences with Siwan once again voicing her strong objections to Moiraine's plan as they dress in their inn room. She feels Moiraine is assuming all the significant risks by taking on the highly visible role of a noble lady, while Siwan is meant to be largely unnoticed as her maid. Moiraine, however, remains resolute, insisting that Siwan's role carries just as many risks. Their tense dynamic is briefly interrupted when Moiraine attempts to distract Siwan with a compliment about her dress, leading to a rare giggle from Siwan. Downstairs in the common room, Siwan wants to have a large breakfast to continue their argument, but Moiraine decisively moves forward by arranging for an escort with the stern innkeeper, Mistress Tolvina. After paying an inflated price for two of the inn's bodyguards, they depart in a sedan chair to visit a bank. During their journey and at the opulent banking house, Siwan continues to express her deep misgivings about the entire scheme. At the bank, Moiraine uses a letter of rights to withdraw a very large quantity of gold, enduring the scrutiny of the banker, Camille Noalin, who examines the document with an enlarging glass. On their return trip, laden with heavy purses of gold, Siwan loudly speculates that the Black Aja must be involved in recent events, a comment which is overheard by a passing noblewoman who promptly flees in panic. This careless slip earns Siwan a sharp, disapproving look from Moiraine, a clear reminder of the constant danger they are in. They then proceed to the city's finest seamstress, a haughty woman named Silene Doralmin. The seamstress initially scoffs at Moiraine's demand for several elaborate dresses to be completed by the next day, but Moiraine shrewdly counters by correcting the woman's false claim about a royal visit, and then dumping a large pile of gold on the table as a down payment, with more promised upon timely completion, which immediately changes the seamstress's mind. 2 days later, their plan is put into action. They arrive at the Ezdaishar Palace, where Moiraine is received with the honor due to a member of House Damodred, while Siwan, now in the guise of a maid named Suki, is completely ignored, proving the invisibility aspect of the plan is working. However, they immediately encounter a significant obstacle when Siwan learns that their target, the Lady Inez, is in a month-long period of deep mourning and seclusion, seeing no one. Moiraine suggests that revealing herself as an Aes Sedai would grant her access, as no one would refuse a sister. Siwan vehemently rejects this idea, arguing it would attract far too much dangerous attention. The chapter concludes with Siwan taking charge of her part of the mission, insisting she can use her inconspicuous status as a maid to get close to the secluded servants, hinting at a plan involving a young footman, and thereby gain access to Inez on her own terms. Chapter 25. An answer. Upon her arrival for an audience, Moiraine is met by an imposing and frosty Shatayan, a high-ranking court official whose demeanor underscores the gravity of Moiraine's situation. While attempting to be pleasant and melt the woman's icy exterior, Moiraine's thoughts are consumed by worry over Siwan's methods, specifically the troubling idea that Siwan might be involving herself with a young footman simply to gain access to servants of the Lady Inez. As she is escorted through the palace, Moiraine observes that the decor is surprisingly peaceful for a borderland fortress, featuring marble statues of women and children and tapestries depicting garden scenes rather than battles. This peaceful aesthetic is abruptly contrasted when she spots a courtyard where two men, whom she recognizes as Rhine and Bukama, are engaged in a brutal practice sword fight. The sight reinforces her need to avoid them, and Lan, fearing their familiarity with her, could lead to questions that might compromise her identity and mission, particularly the dangerous question of whether she is a true Aes Sedai or merely a pretender. Her audience is with Prince Bryce, a sturdy man with green eyes, along with several of his and Queen Athenielle's relatives. The conversation is a delicate dance of courtly pleasantries, touching upon music, the difficulties of travel, and the recent proliferation of Aes Sedai in the region, a subject Moiraine finds particularly difficult to navigate with the required witty detachment. She struggles to maintain the light tone, her mind elsewhere, and her patience wearing thin with the idle chatter. The nobles, particularly the women, seem to find her dull. A moment of relief comes when Bryce's children are brought in, signalling the end of the formal meeting. While making polite conversation with the children, Moiraine's attention is suddenly seized when the youngest son, Dirk, proudly mentions a man named Lan, whom he calls the King of Malkia. This revelation that Lan Mandragoran, the man she sought, is not just a soldier, but a king in exile, and present in this very palace, sends a shock through Moiraine. Overwhelmed, she feigns a sudden illness to excuse herself, her carefully laid plans thrown into disarray. As she's being led back to her chambers, her escape is cut short when she comes face to face with Moiraine, another Aes Sedai. Moiraine, treated with immense deference by a train of servants, immediately confronts Moiraine, noting her lack of an Aes Sedai ring and questioning her disguise. The conversation leads Moiraine to a terrifying and paradigm-shifting realization. Black Aja sisters must be capable of lying, a direct violation of the unbreakable 3 oaths that bind all other Aes Sedai. Moiraine then delivers a chilling, veiled threat, advising Moiraine to remain quiet and still, invoking the name of the formidable Cadsuan, This public encounter effectively shatters Moiraine's disguise. Realizing the immense danger she is in and that secrecy is no longer an option, Moiraine makes a bold gamble. She puts on her great serpent ring, openly declaring her status, and forces her way into Lan Mandragoran's apartments. She finds him shirtless and practicing with his sword, a cold and imposing figure. He is initially dismissive until Moiraine invokes the ancient pledge of Malkia to the White Tower. In response, Lan challenges her with a bitter, long-held question. Where was the White Tower when his kingdom of Malkia fell to the shadow? In a momentous decision, Moiraine breaks tower law and reveals a deeply held secret, that over 100 Aes Sedai were dispatched to aid Malkia, but arrived too late. A failure the tower concealed to protect its image of infallibility. This honest answer is enough to secure Lan's reluctant assistance, and she asks him to have his man, Bukama, secretly watch Moiraine. Returning to her rooms, Moiraine and Siuan endure an infuriating visit from a young, arrogant noblewoman named Iselle, who demands Moiraine take her to the White Tower immediately. Once the girl is gone, Siuan shares her findings. While her conversations with the footman yielded little, she learned one critical piece of information. The boy she seeks was born one day after the Aiel army retreated from Tar Valon, a date which aligns perfectly with Gitara Moroso's deathbed, foretelling of the dragon's rebirth. This confirms they have found the right child. Siuan then outlines her plan to get herself dismissed from Moiraine's service, in order to infiltrate the household of the Lady Inez. As the chapter closes, a message arrives from Lan's man, reporting that Merian spent her day with Prince Bryce, not the Lady Inez. This strange development deeply unnerves Moiraine, who understands that she is missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, leaving her to fear that the infant dragon reborn is in more danger than she ever imagined. Chapter 26. When to Surrender. Lan Mandragoran moved with practiced silence through the corridors of the Estaisha, employing all the skills he had acquired in the Blight to remain unseen. He was determined to find his armsman, Bukama, before his de facto captor, Lady Edain, could further tighten her control over him. Edain had been using his dowry, his bond of obligation, to manipulate him, planning to announce his marriage to her daughter, Iselle, a union he desperately wanted to avoid. He knew that his only true option was to flee, a course of action that would shatter Edain's ambitions of reclaiming Malkia, but would also free him from her schemes. His escape was delayed only by his need to speak with Bukama, the man who had carried him to safety as an infant, and whose own dreams deserved consideration. While hiding, Lan observed the Aes Sedai Moiraine in a quiet conversation with Iselle, a meeting that briefly puzzled him before he dismissed it to continue his search. His journey was violently interrupted when an unseen force suddenly struck him on a grand staircase, sending him tumbling head over heels to the floor below. Though bruised, his training allowed him to survive the fall with no broken bones, but he was certain he had been attacked with the one power. Before he could process this assassination attempt, a palace guard found him with terrible news. He was rushed to a side passage where he found Bukama lying dead, a dagger buried in his back. Kneeling beside the man who was a father to him in all but blood, Lan felt a wave of grief and guilt, realizing that Bukama had died as a consequence of being entangled in the dangerous games of the Aes Sedai. His intention to run away transformed into a need for confrontation, and he set off to find Moiraine, no longer caring who saw him. Lan burst into Moiraine's apartments, his face marred with fresh bruises, and coolly accused her of the murder and the attempt on his own life. He laid out the facts. Bukama was dead, and an Aes Sedai had used the power against him, leaving her as the most likely culprit. Moiraine, however, instantly pieced together a more sinister picture. Realizing Marian's involvement, and recalling that Iselle had been seen with Prince Bryce and his young son Dirk, she understood that a far deadlier plot was in motion. She explained to a skeptical Lan that there was no time to summon guards, as they had no proof that would stand against the word of an Aes Sedai. She convinced him to lead her to a private place where Bryce might have gone, and they raced through the palace. They arrived on a high, windswept stone walkway to a horrifying scene. Marian, glowing with the light of Sidar, held Prince Bryce, Dirk, and a terrified Izel captive in bonds of air. Standing with her was Rhine, Lan's swordsman acquaintance, now revealed as a dark friend. A battle erupted immediately. Rhine engaged Lan in a desperate sword duel, while Moiraine launched a magical assault on Marian. Moiraine was horrified to find that Marian was significantly stronger in the power and was able to hold 3 people captive while still handily fending off her attacks. Marian fought with a cruel serenity, using weaves of fire that were forbidden by the 3 oaths and taunting Moiraine with threats of torture, confirming beyond any doubt that she was of the Black Arja. The fight reached a grim turning point when Marian, growing impatient, levitated young Dirk over the stone railing and dropped him to his death. The shock of the boy's murder momentarily stunned Moiraine, breaking her connection to the source. In that instant, Marian did the same to Prince Bryce, who fell silently, his face a mask of pure hatred. As Marian then lifted a frantic Isel, Moiraine, unable to channel but fueled by sheer determination, stumbled forward and drove her belt knife deep into the Black Age's back. Marian collapsed, dead, and her weaves vanished. Isel was left teetering on the edge of the railing. Moiraine scrambled to grab her hand, but dizzy and her grip slick with blood, she could not hold on. She watched in horror as Isel fell, shrieking, into the abyss. In the aftermath, Lan, who had defeated and killed Rhine, comforted Moiraine. He explained that Rhine was the better swordsman, but grew careless, failing to understand that for a Malkieri, surrender only comes after death. Moiraine, clinging to an outward calm to mask her profound grief and shock, healed Lan's wounds. To protect the White Tower from the scandal of a Black Sister and to prevent the Shadow from benefiting, she made the difficult decision to destroy the evidence. She used the one power to incinerate Marian's body, securing Lan's promise of silence. The next day, as the palace mourned, Siwan Sanche arrived in Moiraine's rooms. After Moiraine recounted the horrific events, they analysed the pattern. Marian had tried to kill Lan and had succeeded in killing Dirk, both of whom were known for their extraordinary luck. This led Siwan to a terrifying revelation. The Black Arja knew the dragon had been reborn, but not when or where. They were therefore systematically hunting and killing any man or boy who showed the slightest sign of the ability to channel, which often manifested in its early stages as uncanny luck. Their infant dragon was safe only because he was too young to exhibit such traits. Understanding the urgency, Moiraine altered her plans. She sent Siwan back to the White Tower to act as an intelligence gatherer, while she continued the search alone. Learning that Lan had departed for the Blight, intending to die in his one-man war, Moiraine galloped after him. She found him on a hill where he had just burned his braided hair cord, a symbolic act of severing his past. She laid everything bare, telling him of the dragon reborn and the war for the world's survival. She offered him a place in a war he could actually win, asking him to become her warder. He accepted, kneeling and swearing the oaths. After she bonded him to her, he sensed her overwhelming grief through their new connection and offered her the stoic wisdom of a soldier. Say a prayer for the dead and ride on. Together, they turned their horses south, ready to begin their search for the dragon reborn.